Okay, welcome to Rider W, as in William, which is to the FARBAR contract, which is the backup contract. So let's go ahead and read the top portion as usual, and then we'll come down and take a look at the body. Listen to the audio, of course, which you're doing if you're hearing me now. Realize that this is a contract, so it's not. This is a contract with a third party, all right, that you're already under contract with one deal. You're going to enter in or present, if you're representing the buyer, a contract with a seller who is already under contract with another party as the primary, and you're going to be the backup or the secondary contract. And or if you are the seller, you're entering into a contract with another buyer that will automatically fall into first place if the primary contract terminates. But there are some caveats to it. So realize that this is a contract. It's just that this buyer is in quote unquote second position. If the primary contract terminates, then this buyer, in this case, automatically moves into first position. Pay special attention to the end date of this backup, and then also to what is considered the effective date. And then this buyer, okay, the one who's using the backup, their right to terminate if proper notice is delivered. So let's go see what I mean by all of that. Okay, so realize again, we've got a primary contract already in place, and then a third party is coming in to present a backup offer. This backup contract is subject to the termination of a prior executed contract between seller and a third party. So the seller's already under contract with somebody else. Now these two people are saying, hey, we're going to go into a contract for second position. All right. If the prior executed contract, which is what they're calling the primary contract, if the prior executed contract is terminated and seller gives a written notice of the termination, so we don't know, let's say we represent the buyer in this situation where we are the backup, and we're coming along just waiting to see if the first deal falls through. If we get delivered written notice of the termination anytime prior to, so now this is where we're going to put in a date. This date would be the time period that the backup contract would expire. All right, so we're going to give them 2 weeks, we're going to give them 3 weeks, we're going to give them however long you want. Just realize that if you put a date in here, then if the first one terminates, this automatically goes into primary position. This contingency shall be removed. So if you put a date in there, you're good to go. Now, are you obligated to that? We're going to learn later that the buyer, this backup contract buyer, can get out of this at any time by delivering written notice any time prior to being moved to first position. All right, so anyway, let's go back to this. This contingency shall be removed and this backup contract shall move into first position. So if the sellers and the listing agent notify this backup offer that yes, you are now in first position, then you are moved into first position. The effective date of this backup contract, okay, shall be the date the seller delivers a written notice of termination of the prior executed contract. What does that mean? That means that all the timeframes for home inspection and loan approval, so on, would start not at the time that this backup contract is signed, but at the time that the backup becomes the primary. Are you with me on that? I had a question just the other day on this. We were talking about whether or not the buyer of this backup contract would have to deliver escrow. Well, it depends on how you write it up. But if you wrote it up as buyer shall deliver the initial escrow deposit within 3 days of the effective date, then this clause right here would indicate that we would not have to give any escrow until 3 days after the first contract terminated and this offer got moved into first position. Does that make sense? Okay, now if you wrote it up that shall deliver it on such and such a date, then the escrow has to be delivered on such and such a date. But if you do what we suggest on the contract and say within 3 days of effective date, then that clause right here in this line would protect you from giving any escrow money at this point. Okay. Continuing on, it says the buyer of this backup contract may terminate this backup contract by delivering written notice to the seller prior to the date seller delivers written notice. So anytime prior, even to this date, as long as the seller has not given notice that the first one fell apart and we're moving into first place, by delivering written notice of the termination of the prior executed contract, and buyer shall be refunded the deposit, thereby releasing buyer and seller. So your buyer, let's say you represent the buyer that's delivering this backup, could continue to look for other properties, and if they find somebody else they like and they want to not be obligated, no longer want to be obligated to this backup, can then terminate this backup in essence, as long as they've not received notice from the seller that they are now in first position. That should be pretty straightforward. If you got any questions, as always, let us know, and hope you have now a better, clear understanding of the backup contract.